The first time she saw him, she thought humanity was fragile. The human, as he walked into the ruined plaza of the once great alien city, seemed barely more than a child in a world of towering spires, curved like frozen crescents of metal, and streets cracked with the weight of centuries. The air shimmered with a heat that bent perception and a faint, humming pulse of energy that made her claws twitch involuntarily. She had fought beasts that could shred mountains, and she had faced machines that reshaped continents in a day. Yet this human moved as if he were nothing more than a shadow flitting across ruins older than most civilizations she had known. He carried a sword strapped across his back, narrow and unassuming, like a relic of some primitive war. She watched him from above, perched on the jagged edge of a shattered tower, wings folded tightly against her body, and she allowed herself a faint smirk. He stopped at the center of the plaza, where the stone floor had buckled and the patterns of alien script burned faintly in the cracks, glowing as if whispering secrets she could almost hear but could not fully comprehend. A breeze caught his cloak, tossing it over one shoulder, and she noticed the way he paused, scanning the open space as if he expected danger at any moment. Most humans she had encountered cowered at the first display of power, the vibrations in the air, the sheer size of her kind, the latent energy of the ruins. But this one did not flinch, not once. There was a steadiness in him that seemed almost ridiculous for someone so small, so fragile in comparison to the titans that had fallen centuries ago. Her curiosity drew her closer, wings spreading to catch the air, feathers rustling like silk over steel. She descended slowly, almost lazily, careful to keep her shadow hidden from his eyes. And yet, even with her attempts at stealth, he sensed her approach. The human lifted his head, eyes sharp beneath the hood of his cloak, and for a moment their gazes met. She had expected fear, or awe, or a tremble in the knees, but he offered none of these. Instead, there was a spark of something fierce, something ancient. He did not yet understand it himself, she realized, but that spark would grow into fire, if it survived what was coming. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of ozone and scorched metal, remnants of battles long past and energy weapons fired by beings long extinct. She felt the pulse of the ruins beneath her feet, and realized they were not entirely dead. They were watching, waiting for a proper reason to awaken. Most who walked here were too weak to command the ruins' attention. Most would crumble. She had assumed this human would too, yet he stood straight, shoulders back, as if the air itself were a challenge to him. And she almost laughed. A sound broke the silence, a low vibration that made the air hum, resonating from the depths of the city. Shadows moved among the broken spires, forming shapes that were impossible to describe. She had fought these things before, creatures that fed on fear, beings that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Most of the time, they were content to strike at weaker prey. Most of the time, humans were fragile. He shifted his grip on the sword, long fingers curling around the worn hilt. The blade caught the dim light and reflected it like liquid silver, sharp enough to split a star if wielded correctly. Something in her shifted then, a warning, subtle and instinctive. This was no ordinary human. She could sense it, even without knowing the rules of his kind. There was strength here, a rhythm in his heartbeat that harmonized with the city's pulse rather than recoiling from it. Most humans quivered in its presence. This one thrived. The first of them came silently from the shadows, a mass of shapes that rippled like liquid metal, moving too fast for the eye to follow. Her claws flexed instinctively as she prepared to leap, to descend and tear the fragile human limb from limb. And yet, the human did not move backward. He did not scream. He simply drew the sword from his back in one smooth motion, the blade whispering as it left the scabbard, a sound that seemed to slice through the very tension of the air. The creatures struck simultaneously, a blur of shadow and hunger, but he met them with the precision that made her pulse skip. He danced, pivoting on feet that seemed ill-suited for combat, yet every motion was perfect. The sword moved faster than sight could track, slicing through forms that had no reason to fear him, cutting in arcs that no human should be capable of sustaining. Sparks flew where the blade met alien alloy, and the first creature dissolved into a cloud of dust and screaming energy. She landed lightly on the edge of a broken platform, watching as he continued to fight. With every strike, she felt a shift in perception. Fragile, she had thought, but this human, he was more than a predator. He was a storm contained in a single body, a force that made the ruins themselves tremble. His movements were not fueled by rage alone. There was a calm certainty in him, an understanding of balance, of leverage, of the way energy itself bent to intention. A second wave came, larger and more vicious, each form twisting in impossible geometries, mouths opening impossibly wide to devour his flesh. And still, he did not hesitate. The sword swept in a silver arc, and even she could see that the blade was singing, not with metal, but with something older, something alive. He fought not with the strength of a single man, but with the memory of countless generations embedded in him, ancestors who had survived worlds, wars, and extinction. She crouched, wings flicking nervously as the realization struck her. The human was not fragile, not in the way she had been taught to measure fragility. His body might be weak by her standards, but the essence within him was something else entirely. It was fire and iron, unbreakable because it refused to bow. The creatures recoiled, sensing the change in him, the shift in dominance. Even they, masters of shadow and hunger, hesitated when the last creature fell. Dissipating in a wisp of vapor and shrieking echoes, he stood in the center of the plaza, chest heaving, eyes bright with focus and awareness. The sword dripped with energy, humming softly, a resonance that even she could feel vibrating in her bones. For a moment, silence returned, and she allowed herself to descend fully. Landing in front of him, he did not flinch at her size, did not step back despite the length of her limbs and the sharpness of her claws. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. He was curious, cautious, but not afraid. And that, she realized, was the part humans possessed that no other species could replicate. Fearless curiosity, tempered with instinct, capable of feats that logic alone could not predict. "You fight well," she said, her voice low, resonating like a bell struck in a hollow cave. She did not often speak first, not to praise she could crush without effort. But there was something in him that demanded acknowledgement. He glanced at her, blade lowering slightly, but not abandoning readiness. "I survive," he said simply. It was not boastful, nor arrogant. It was a statement of fact, as if survival itself were a weapon he wielded as deftly as the sword in his hands. Something about that response made her pulse quicken her with fear, but with respect. Few beings had ever spoken to her as an equal, and fewer still had made her consider the possibility that she could be outmatched. That thought alone was dangerous, intoxicating. The ruins seemed to sense the shift, the air thickening with energy. She could feel the weight of generations in the stones around them, spirits of the long-dead city pressing against the boundaries of existence, testing, probing, and he did not falter. His gaze did not waver. The sword hummed with a resonance that seemed to call to the ruins themselves, awakening long-dormant power that had been waiting for someone small enough to pass, unnoticed but strong enough to wield it. "You are different," she said, stepping closer, talons clicking against the cracked stone. She wanted to study him, to understand how something so slight could carry so much weight in a universe that had taught her that size and power were everything. He did not respond immediately, merely watching, his chest rising and falling, eyes scanning the shadows, and then, slowly, he lowered the sword, tip resting lightly on the ground. "Difference survives," he said finally, and in that moment, she understood. It was not the sword that made him dangerous. It was him. Every step, every breath, every motion was a challenge to the universe itself. She had seen gods fall in her time, had witnessed the collapse of civilizations at the hands of beings who considered themselves eternal, and yet, in his presence, she felt the first stirrings of doubt that perhaps mortals fragile, fleeting, underestimated humans could endure what others could not, could rise where gods had faltered. Her wings stretched, feathers brushing against the edge of the ruined tower as she considered her next move. Most of her kind would attack, claim the human as a curiosity or a meal. Most would laugh at his feeble frame and fragile bones, but she would not. Not yet, because something in her recognized the truth. He was more than flesh. He carried the weight of possibility, of potential unimagined, and she, for the first time in centuries, felt a flicker of something she had thought long dead. Hope, dot above them. The sky shimmered with the remnants of storms and energy fields, auroras of color bending across clouds of metal and dust. The human stood alone, small and unassuming, yet unbroken. His sword gleamed with quiet authority, as if aware that it, too, was a part of something greater. And she, predator and observer, realized that the story of humanity was about to be rewritten, not by gods, not by titans, but by a single human. Standing in the ruins, unbowed, unbroken, and ready to make even the impossible kneel. The alien did not leave immediately, though she had the strength and speed to vanish before he could even notice. She lingered in the shadows, watching as the human examined the ruins with careful, deliberate movements. Every step he took seemed to leave an imprint not only on the stone beneath his feet, but on the very air around him. A subtle shift that made her wings twitch with anticipation. Most humans would have faltered by now, terrified by the whispers of the ruins, the barely visible tremors of long-dead guardians awakening beneath the surface. Yet he moved as if the place were his own, touching a broken arch, running a fingertip along alien script, and muttering words she did not recognize but somehow understood to be commands, coaxing the energy of the ruins to obey, to reveal, to bend a sound like a distant thunderclap rolled across the fractured cityscape. But it was too regular, too rhythmic to be natural. The sky split open with a flash, a fissure of light that burned across the horizon, revealing a shape that had no right to exist in the same plane of reality as a human. The gods had come, not the faint fractured myths whispered among weaker races, but the real things, immense beings of energy and thought, their forms impossible to describe, flickering between shapes as though the universe itself could not decide on their appearance. Even she, predator and veteran of countless battles, felt the pull of awe and terror. The human did not flinch, not in the slightest. He stood at the center of the plaza, cloak catching in the artificial breeze, and tightened his grip on the sword. Its silver edge gleamed with a resonance that matched the vibration in the air, and for the first time she felt something like fear, not for herself, but because she sensed what was coming. Most mortals, most creatures, even the bravest warriors she had known, would have fallen to their knees at the mere sight of such entities. And yet, he breathed slowly, deliberately, centering himself. There was no panic, no hesitation, just a quiet, unshakable presence. The first god descended, its immense form folding and unfolding like a collapsing star. Its voice was a harmonic storm that shook the ruins with sound alone. "Mortal," it said, words less spoken than imprinted on the mind, "you trespass where your kind has no right. Step aside, and you may yet be spared." The human's response was almost casual, a tilt of his head, a narrowing of eyes that reflected not arrogance but understanding. "I do not step aside," he said, voice carrying in the ruins without amplification, "because I am here to protect, not to yield." The air rippled violently as the god's gaze swept over him. Otherworldly energy crackled around the deity, a storm capable of erasing the city itself with a thought. Yet the human did not move. Instead, he adjusted his footing, letting the ruins beneath him amplify his stance, the sword lifting in a slow, deliberate arc as though it were alive. Sensing the imminent confrontation and feeding on his intent, the alien observer could hardly believe what she saw. Every fiber of her being screamed at the impossibility, yet it was happening. The mortal, fragile by every conventional measure, had stopped a god in its descent, with nothing more than a sword, a stance, and an unshakable will. The creature hesitated, its massive energy form quivering, not because it feared him, but because it could not fully comprehend him. Then the battle began. The god struck first, a sweeping motion that seemed to warp the city itself, twisting stone and air in a devastating arc. The human responded with a precision that defied reason. The sword sang as it met the energy wave, deflecting it, not with brute force, but with movement that seemed choreographed to perfection. Each strike and parry exploiting the smallest flaw in the god's attack. Sparks of pure energy erupted wherever blade met divine essence, and even she, predator and superior by her own species standards, felt her breath catch. The god recovered quickly, striking again, faster this time, its form folding through dimensions, appearing and disappearing, reshaping the air to crush him. But the human adapted, anticipating with uncanny foresight, moving in ways that seemed impossible, dodging, pivoting, striking, all while maintaining a calm awareness that suggested he was not merely reacting, he was controlling the flow of combat itself. She could not tear her eyes away. He was small, almost laughably so in comparison, yet every motion radiated power. Not the raw, obvious power of size or energy, but a subtler, more terrifying kind, the strength of intelligence, instinct, and will fused into a single, unbreakable entity. With every clash, every deflection, the god's patience thinned. Its strikes became erratic, violent, desperate. Most mortals would have fallen long before now, Most would have screamed and begged, but he remained calm, calculating, unyielding. The alien felt a strange mix of exhilaration and fear. She had fought enemies that could annihilate planets, yet this human made her wonder whether such beings might not always triumph. The gods, for all their majesty and power, were still subject to flaws that could be exploited by those small enough, fast enough, clever enough to survive their own perception. And he was all three. The god's form expanded, growing to the size of the ruined towers themselves, a swirling mass of energy and thought that sought to crush, consume, erase. The human did not retreat. Instead, he raised the sword above his head and struck not at the god itself, but at the space between them. The energy exploded in a cascade of blinding light, waves of force radiating outward and striking the very fabric of reality. The god screamed a soundless wail that rattled the bones of the alien and made the stone beneath them fracture anew. When the light dimmed, God faltered, its form flickering like a dying star. It had expected to destroy a fragile human, not content with one who could wield the very fabric of the ruins as a weapon. And the human, breath steady, stance unwavering, pressed the advantage, driving the god backward with a flurry of strikes that combined swordplay, instinct, and what could only be described as destiny itself. The alien landed beside him, unable to resist the pull of the scene. "He is extraordinary," she whispered, almost to herself, talons digging into stone. Even her voice trembled at the magnitude of what she was witnessing. The human glanced at her, eyes calm and clear, and offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod. There was no arrogance in it, no prideful claim of superiority. Only understanding of the impossible weight he carried and the duty he would not abandon. Another god arrived then, descending from a rift in the sky with multiple forms that shimmered like liquid crystal. It did not speak, only observed, calculating the human as a threat, a curiosity, an anomaly. Most beings faced with this sight would flee, but the human did not flinch. He raised the sword, its resonance now audible even to her, a deep tone that seemed to harmonize with the ruins themselves. And prepared to meet this new threat, she wanted to intervene, to protect him, yet something restrained her. She sensed that this was a trial not of survival but of revelation. The human was proving, to the gods themselves, that fragility was not the measure of strength. That size, species, or origin did not define the capacity to dominate, to endure, to shape fate. The battle unfolded like a symphony of impossibility. The human moved faster than thought, each strike precise, exploiting weaknesses in creatures that had existed for millennia. Energy clashed against steel and will, tearing at the very foundation of the city. Yet he remained unbroken. He was everywhere and nowhere at once, a single point of intent, a pivot around which reality seemed to bend. She watched, awestruck, as the second god faltered, unable to comprehend the mortal's combination of courage, intelligence, and raw potential. Its strikes became chaotic, its form unstable, and she realized that it was not merely fighting him, it was learning from him, adapting, struggling against a force it could not fully predict. At that moment, she understood why humans endured where gods fell. It was not their strength in the conventional sense, nor even their cleverness alone. It was the unshakable determination to act, to survive, to protect, and persevere against impossible odds. They were fragile by design, yes, easily broken in body, but within them burned a resilience that no god, no alien species, no machine could destroy. When the battle finally reached a moment of stillness, both gods flickering, uncertain, and the air thick with energy and ozone, the human lowered his sword slightly. He did not celebrate, he did not gloat, he merely stood, breathing steadily, a calm center amidst chaos. And the alien beside him realized that he had not only survived, but dominated. The impossible had bent before him. Gods retreated then, not fully defeated but humbled, aware that a mortal had faced them and remained unbroken. She felt a shiver run down her spine as they vanished into the rift from which they had come, leaving the ruins echoing with the remnants of their presence. The human turned to her, sword still in hand, and simply said, "They will learn. All of them will learn." For the first time, she felt a strange sensation, one she had thought lost to the ages. Hope, pure and unadulterated, radiating from the smallest, most unexpected source. He was fragile in body, yes, but he carried the essence of humanity in every motion, every breath, every heartbeat. And that essence, she realized, was more powerful than gods. The ruins had settled into a tense, fragile calm, but the human did not relax. Even as the echoes of the god's retreat faded into the horizon, he walked the cracked streets, blade in hand, eyes scanning every shadow, every fragment of stone that might conceal a hidden threat. The alien observed from above, wings folded, talons gripping the edge of a crumbling tower, feeling a strange mixture of admiration and unease. Humans were rarely capable of such vigilance without fatigue, and yet he seemed untiring, a single point of purpose in a universe that had once considered them weak and fleeting. The city, ancient and alive with latent energy, responded to him differently than it had to the gods. Stones hummed under his feet, cracks spreading like veins, casting pale glows into the twilight. He did not command the ruins with arrogance, but with awareness, as if he understood their history, their function, their intent. The alien tilted her head, wings flicking, realizing that his power was not only in combat but in perception. He could read patterns invisible to almost all sentient beings, anticipate movements of enemies before they happened, and even bend ancient energy to his will. A tremor ran through the ground, subtler than before, a vibration that carried intention. Another wave of gods was coming, drawn by the echoes of the first encounter. They had spoken in the distance, observing, communicating across dimensions in patterns too complex for ordinary understanding. The human sensed them before they appeared fully, his sword humming softly, a resonance that cut through the alien's senses. She descended closer, curious and cautious, to see how a mortal would confront such overwhelming power yet again. The first of the second wave emerged not from the sky but from the ground itself, a being of shadow and crystal that seemed to fracture the light around it. Its voice was an unearthly vibration that threatened to shatter bone and consciousness alike. "You trespass again," it said, words simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. "You interfere where the order of eternity cannot tolerate defiance." The human's eyes narrowed. "Order does not make right," he said simply, a statement devoid of hesitation, "and right cannot be measured by fear." His voice carried across the plaza, calm, certain, and the alien felt the ruins themselves respond. As if acknowledging that a new balance had been struck, the shadow crystal god struck first, sending shards of energy cascading across the plaza, tearing at the air with jagged precision. Most mortals would have fled, most warriors would have been disintegrated before the blade could even cross their path. Yet the human moved with preternatural awareness, pivoting, leaping, striking, the sword leaving trails of silver that cut through the shards, dispersing them into harmless dust. Every motion was a calculated blend of skill, instinct, and force of will, a testament to the ingenuity embedded in humanity through generations of survival against impossible odds. She watched, talons digging into the cracked stone, as the human anticipated and countered each strike. He was small, almost laughably fragile compared to the enormous being he faced, yet he never hesitated, never wavered. The sword sang as it clashed with divine energy, silver arcs meeting jagged shards in bursts of light and sound that made the alien's wings tremble. The god shifted, adapting, realizing that its usual methods of domination and terror were failing. This human did not fight with brute strength alone. He wielded cunning, insight, and willpower like a blade sharper than any sword. The alien realized something fundamental about humanity as she watched him. They were unpredictable. Their logic was not linear, their courage not dependent on scale or power. Where a god calculated outcomes in millennia, the human responded in a heartbeat, improvising, adapting, and turning the tide of combat with creativity and decisiveness that no other species could match. He was fragile, yes, but he carried potential that dwarfed even the greatest beings in the cosmos. Another god appeared, its form rippling with liquid light and sound, a being whose mere gaze could bend time within a localized radius. It circled the plaza, testing the human, probing his defenses with attacks that twisted reality itself. Yet he met each strike without fear, pivoting and striking with precision, not just surviving but asserting control. The sword became an extension of his body, slicing through distortions of space and energy with an elegance that seemed almost effortless. The alien moved closer, compelled to witness the unfolding events at ground level. She landed lightly, wings folded, as the human dispatched the first god's shards and prepared for the second wave. "How?" she whispered, almost to herself, talons brushing stone. "How can one being so small stand against them?" The human did not hear her. focused entirely on the battlefield. Yet his actions answered her question more eloquently than words ever could. Every strike was measured, every movement calculated yet instinctive. He seemed to understand not only the mechanics of combat, but the principles that governed existence itself. Energy bent around him, not because he commanded it, but because he flowed with it, anticipating its natural tendencies and redirecting them to his advantage. The gods faltered as they realized this was not mere luck or accident. The human was learning, adapting faster than their perception could keep pace. What should have been a swift and devastating confrontation became a test of endurance, an exercise in improvisation against an entity designed to be and he, small and fragile, stood firm, a testament to the unyielding spirit of his species. The alien felt an unfamiliar sensation, admiration tinged with fear. She had seen civilizations fall under her own power, witnessed titans crumble, watched beasts devour continents. Yet here was a human, doing what no other being could do, making gods hesitate, struggle, and even fear. She stepped closer still, wings brushing the air, her presence almost unnoticed in the chaos, yet she could not pull her eyes away. Every motion of his sword, every adjustment of his stance, every calm breath he drew, was a reminder that fragility was not weakness, and that potential could reside in forms others deemed insignificant. The second god attempted a coordinated strike with the first, converging attacks in an impossible combination designed to overwhelm any mortal, but the human adapted instantly, pivoting, leaping, striking, and the sword became a conductor of impossible harmonies. Energy waves collided with silver arcs, creating shock waves that rippled across the plaza, flattening obstacles yet leaving him untouched. The alien realized she had underestimated the full scope of humanity's ingenuity. This was not just strength or courage, it was an innate capacity to survive, to adapt, and to overcome limits that no other species dared challenge. The gods, immense and eternal, began to understand the truth that she had only glimpsed. Mortals, fragile as they were, possessed a quality the universe itself had underestimated: the audacity to act in defiance of impossibility, the willingness to face annihilation and transform it into triumph. Each strike of the human sword reverberated across the battlefield, not just as force but as a statement, an unspoken declaration that the universe could not dictate the destiny of those who refused to bow. The alien's heart pounded as the battle reached a crescendo. The plaza shook, stone cracking, light bending, energy screaming, yet the human remained steady. Every move a blend of instinct, skill, and the indomitable will of his species. Even the gods faltered under the weight of his presence, realizing that brute power alone would not suffice against a being who embodied resilience, ingenuity, and courage in equal measure. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity compressed into moments, the human struck a decisive blow, not with overwhelming force, but with precision and understanding, cutting through the converging energy forms in a single, fluid motion. The gods recoiled, their forms destabilizing, and for the first time, the alien saw hesitation, uncertainty, even fear. The human stood at the center of the plaza, sword lowered, breathing evenly, as if he had done nothing extraordinary at all. Yet the ruins, the gods, and even she herself could feel the shift. The alien stepped closer, talons digging into the stone, wings flicking with restrained excitement. "You've done it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "You've made them hesitate." The human turned to her, eyes calm, resolute. "They will learn," he said again, almost quietly, yet the weight of the words carried across the ruins. "And the more they learn, the more they will understand that fragility is not weakness. Survival is not measured by size, or strength, or fear. It is measured by the courage to act, the intelligence to adapt, and the will to endure." She nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Humanity, fragile as they appeared, carried within them an essence that no god, no alien, no force of the universe could fully contain. They were underestimated, dismissed, overlooked, and that was their greatest advantage. The human had demonstrated it in battle, in defiance, in triumph. He had taken the impossible and bent it to his will, not through brute force, but through determination, ingenuity, and spirit. As the gods withdrew, stabilizing their forms but clearly shaken, the alien realized that the true story of the universe had changed. A single human had demonstrated the power of potential, the strength hidden within fragility, and the unbreakable will of his kind. The ruins seemed to hum in acknowledgement, the energy of ages responding to his presence, and she understood that humanity's impact was only beginning. The human turned back to the shattered cityscape, sword in hand, and for a moment, the alien saw not just a mortal, but a force capable of reshaping the cosmos itself. "They will learn," he repeated. And this time she understood that it was not a threat, it was a promise, a herald of what was to come. Humanity had begun to claim its place, not through domination, but through endurance, ingenuity, an unyielding spirit. And the alien, once predator and skeptic, now felt a stirring she had never known, hope, awe, and the certainty that the universe itself would never be the same again. The air still vibrated with the remnants of the last battle, a subtle hum that reverberated through the ruins like the heartbeat of the city itself. The human stood at the center of the plaza, sword lowered but ready, eyes scanning the horizon. The alien beside him, wings half folded, talons gripping the fractured stone, could feel the tension in the atmosphere. The gods had retreated, but they were not defeated. They had learned something far more unsettling. Mortals, fragile and seemingly insignificant, could endure what immortals could not, and in doing so, alter the balance of power across the cosmos. The first stirrings of a response came not from the heavens, but from the ruins themselves. Stones shifted subtly beneath their feet, faint lines of light weaving across the plaza, connecting broken spires and arches, as if the city recognized the human as a catalyst. Energy hummed through the air, a dormant force awakening at last, resonating with the will of a mortal who had defied the impossible. The human did not command it with arrogance or knowledge. He allowed it to flow naturally, guiding it with instinct, with intuition, with an understanding that came from the very essence of survival. The alien tilted her head, trying to comprehend it. No species she had encountered could interact with ancient, sentient energy in such a fluid, effortless way. The gods had returned in fragments now, their forms flickering across dimensions, watching, testing, measuring. Some approached cautiously, others loomed with curiosity and fury. Their combined presence was a storm, a force that could unmake planets, civilizations, even the concept of time itself. And yet the human did not falter. He adjusted his stance, feeling the subtle flow of energy beneath his feet, letting the sword vibrate with resonance, and met their gaze with a calm that defied reason. They had come expecting fear, awe, and submission. They found none. Only resolve, only focus, only the quiet, unyielding will of a mortal determined to survive and protect what mattered. The alien realized then that humanity's strength was not just in combat. It was in perception, in adaptability, in courage. The human read the battlefield as though it were a living entity, anticipating attacks, turning the environment into a weapon, and exploiting weaknesses invisible to the gods themselves. Where they relied on power and terror, he relied on insight and action, converting fragility into advantage. Every move he made was precise, every breath measured, every strike deliberate. He was small in body, but colossal in impact. A god struck first, a being of molten light and energy, attempting to crush him beneath raw force. The human pivoted, blade cutting through the energy, deflecting shards that could have vaporized cities. He moved faster than thought, leaping and spinning, striking not at the being itself, but at the points of imbalance, disrupting the flow of its attacks, forcing it to react, to adapt, to stumble. The alien watched in disbelief. No other mortal could have done this. No other being, mortal or immortal, could have endured such onslaught without shattering. Yet here he was, standing firm, a testament to the unbreakable spirit of his kind. Another god joined, a shadow that warped reality, bending space around it to crush or ensnare. The human's sword sang as it clashed with the being, silver arcs slicing through distortion, breaking chains of energy, turning the god's own attacks back upon it. He did not fight blindly. Each action was a strategy, a principle, a calculation born of instinct honed over generations. Every strike, every pivot, every block demonstrated something the gods had not anticipated. Mortals did not merely survive, they transformed the battlefield into their own instrument, turning vulnerability into unparalleled strength. The alien stepped closer, wings flexing, talons scraping stone. "How do you—" she began, but paused, realizing words could not capture what she was witnessing. It was not technique, nor speed, nor even intelligence alone. It was humanity distilled, courage unbound by scale, ingenuity unbound by expectation, and an indomitable will that refused to yield. The human's blade moved as a conductor moves an orchestra, every motion precise, resonant, shaping reality itself in ways subtle yet absolute. Even she felt the pull of the sword's energy, a rhythm that vibrated in harmony with the ruins, with the city, with the universe itself. The gods began to falter, not from weakness, but from revelation. They had underestimated mortals, had dismissed fragility as incapacity, had assumed that finite brief-lived beings could never match or surpass them. And yet here was proof, a single human, standing against overwhelming odds, bending not only energy and matter, but expectation itself. The realization spread among the divine entities, and hesitation crept into their attacks. Their strikes became cautious, their forms flickered, and doubt and alien sensation touched their consciousness. The human pressed his advantage, not with cruelty, not with arrogance, but with the quiet precision of inevitability. He struck at weak points, disrupted flows of energy, countered complex formations with simplicity and clarity. Each god that engaged him staggered, their mastery of the cosmos insufficient to anticipate the ingenuity of mortality. And when one attempted to retreat, another faltered in hesitation, a chain reaction of doubt rippling across the celestial hierarchy. The alien could not help but move even closer, drawn by awe and curiosity. She had hunted creatures of unimaginable power, had fought through wars that reshaped worlds, and yet none had demonstrated what she now saw. Mortality, fragility, finiteness. It was the paradoxical source of power. The human moved with freedom no god could claim, adaptability no immortal could achieve, and courage no entity could impose. Each action was a declaration. Survival was not given, it was claimed. Strength was not measured by scale, it was defined by will. The final god descended, massive and radiant, its presence suffocating, capable of annihilation with thought alone. The human faced it, stance unyielding, sword vibrating with resonance that hummed through the alien's bones. Time seemed to stretch as energy collided, air fractured, and reality itself bent under the weight of their confrontation. The god unleashed its full might, a torrent of energy, intention, and fury designed to erase him. But the human adapted, pivoted, and met each strike with an elegance that seemed impossible. He moved not against the god, but with it, redirecting force, neutralizing power, and asserting dominion not through raw strength, but through presence, mastery, and vision. The alien realized that what she had feared was happening. The human was reshaping the rules of the universe in real time. Gods, titans, beings that had existed for eons, were being taught lessons by a single mortal. Every slash, every pivot, every strike was an argument, a proof, a revelation that mortality carried within it an inexhaustible resource, the capacity to endure, adapt, and prevail beyond expectation. Finally, with a decisive motion, the human struck at the final god's imbalance. Energy cascaded outward, a wave of brilliance that illuminated the entire ruins, and the god faltered, retreating into dimensions unknown, not destroyed, but humbled, aware for the first time that it had faced a being beyond its comprehension. The plaza fell silent, stones hummed, the wind carried echoes of battle and triumph, and the human stood alone, sword in hand, chest rising and falling, eyes calm yet burning with clarity. The alien descended fully, landing beside him, wings folding. She studied him closely, talons brushing the stone. "You have done what no one else could," she said softly. "You have changed the balance." He looked at her, expression calm, almost serene. "Balance is not given," he said. "It is earned, and those who underestimate the small, the fragile, and the fleeting will always be surprised." His words resonated not just in sound, but in the ruins, in the energy that hummed around them, in the cosmos that had witnessed the impossible. The alien felt something she had not felt in centuries, respect, and a recognition that mortality, in all its fragility, could reshape reality itself. Humanity was no longer a footnote in the annals of the universe. It was a force, a principle, a testament to the idea that even the smallest being could make the impossible kneel. The human sheathed his sword, not with triumph, but with quiet certainty. "They will remember," he said. "All of them, gods, titans, civilizations. They will learn what it means to underestimate us." And in that moment, she realized that the universe itself had shifted. The ruins pulsed with a new rhythm, responsive to the presence of a being who refused to bow. Mortals, fragile as they appeared, carried within them an essence that no god could extinguish. The human had proven it, and through him, humanity had begun to claim its rightful place among the stars. As the alien watched, the horizon shimmered with distant light, energy rippling like waves, evidence that the cosmos was beginning to take notice. The gods might recover, civilizations might rise and fall, but the seed had been planted. Humanity, fragile yet indomitable, clever, courageous, and unyielding, had shown that survival was more than endurance. It was the capacity to bend reality to one's will, to inspire awe in the impossible, and to make even gods kneel. The human turned his gaze to the sky, sword at his side, eyes steady, as if anticipating the next challenge, the next impossible opponent, the next universe that underestimated him. And the alien beside him understood fully. This was only the beginning. The story of humanity had begun to ripple across dimensions, to reshape the perception of gods and monsters alike, and nothing, no power, no intellect, no eternity would ever be the same again. For humanity, fragile yet unbreakable, had proven the ultimate truth. Strength is not measured by might alone, but by the courage to act, the will to endure, and the refusal to kneel. And in that refusal, the universe itself had learned to respect and fear the small, the fleeting, the indomitable human.